The Ronald McDonald House Creepypasta, the sequel, written and narrated by Jazz Butterworth. I sat on that bench with the Ronald McDonald statue looking over my shoulder, typing my story for what felt like hours. His presence and occasional laughter was creepy, but I didn't care. I had a story to tell, and I was going to tell it. Finally, I finished. I powered down the laptop. A searing pain shot through my body as I attempted to stand up, reminding me that my foot was in need of medical attention. For the first time, I took a good look at my surroundings, and I noticed that I was out in the middle of nowhere. The 80s style abandoned McDonald's was the only building in sight. I should have still been in Detroit, but I wasn't. I didn't know where I was. There was only a road that seemed to stretch on for miles, surrounded by trees and more trees. My foot was causing me a great deal of pain, so I knew I had to try and hitchhike. With the laptop under my arm, I limped my way towards the road and began walking. The rain soaked through my ripped, dirty hospital gown, but I had to make an effort. I was walking for at least an hour when I came to a sign, nearest town, 50 miles. Just my luck. If I didn't find a ride soon, I was surely going to die out here. All of a sudden, I noticed a dim pair of headlights behind me. I was overjoyed. A car was approaching. I was safe. Or so I thought. I waved my hands frantically in the air and shouted, "Please, stop! I need help!" As the car got closer, I noticed it was an old car, an 80s style Mercury, beaten up and rusted. The car came to a stop, and the driver, the sole occupant of the car, rolled the window down, but didn't say anything. I found that a bit odd. I looked in and noticed that the driver was wearing a rain poncho and had the hood pulled over their head so as to obscure their face. They did, however, motion me to the back seat, so I hopped in As we started to move, I told the driver I had a bad foot wound and I needed to get to a hospital. Still, the driver didn't say anything. I found this all a bit creepy, but I kept reassuring myself that everything would be okay. We would get into town and I would get medical attention for my foot. And hopefully some proper clothing. After a while, my curiosity got the better of me. And I was dying to know who was under that rain poncho. So I looked in the rearview mirror, trying as best I could to see who that face might belong to. Unfortunately for me, though, the driver took one hand off the steering wheel, yanked the hood back, and turned around to face me. And I nearly screamed in horror. It was a Ronald McDonald clown. Just like the ones from the Ronald McDonald house I had escaped from. Then he turned his face back towards the road and continued driving. I knew I had to get out of there if I wanted to survive, so I played it cool. Ever so slightly, I tried to jiggle the handle of the door, but it was locked as expected. Then I noticed the little knob above the handle. If I could pull that knob without making a sound, I could unlock the door and I could roll right out of the car. So ever so slowly, I pulled the knob. Then in one swift motion, I opened the door and I rolled out of the car, landing in a soft patch of grass. I feared the car would stop and the clown would come for me, but no, the car just kept driving. I breathed a sigh of relief. Then I remembered the laptop. I had set it down on the seat next to me, but I didn't care. At this point, sharing my story was the last thing on my mind, as I was more concerned about survival. I dreaded the thought of hitchhiking again, but what choice did I have? If I didn't, I would surely die. As luck would have it, an old Chevy came up behind me. The driver came to a screeching halt, rolled down his window, and asked me if I was all right. He was clearly surprised. Me in my ripped hospital gown and blood coming from my foot. I hopped in the back and he sped off. About 20 minutes later, we made it to town. He took me straight to the hospital, and I was rushed into the emergency room, where doctors worked quickly to save my foot. Several hours later, my foot was successfully saved, and it was bandaged and placed in a cast. I spent the next several days in my own room there at the hospital recovering. At last came the day when I was discharged. As I walked out of the double doors and into the sunlight, I was overcome with immense guilt. All this time, I had thought only about myself. But what about all the other kids stuck in that Ronald McDonald house? I knew there was a chance they could be saved, and I had to do something. Luckily, the local police department wasn't far down the street. I walked in. There was a sergeant at the front desk, sipping a cup of coffee. He set the coffee down, looked up at me and said, "Son, can I help you?" Yes, I stammered. I took a deep breath, and then I told him my story about how I was placed in foster care at the Ronald McDonald house, and the unspeakable horrors I experienced while I was there, and how I escaped. After I had finished, the officer took a long sip of his coffee, set it down, and then he said to me, "Son, I don't see how that's possible. The Ronald McDonald house has been closed for years. The FBI came in and shut them down a long time ago." My heart sank. But that's not possible. I started. I was there. I know this happened to me. You have to believe me. "I'm sorry, son," the officer said. "That place is no more." I knew I had to go back there and see it for myself. The officer gave me some money for a bus fare, and I was on my way. The bus drove on and on and on. Finally, I could see the Detroit skyline in the distance. I knew we weren't far. Eventually, I started recognizing familiar sights, like that dive bar where I had gone a few years prior. with some of my friends to horse around. Eventually my stop came, and I got off the bus. Standing in front of me was the building, but it was boarded up. And where it wasn't, the windows were shattered. Bricks were crumbling. I stared back in disbelief. No, this isn't possible, I said to myself. This can't be happening. I was here. I was just here. They nearly took my life in this building. This is where I made that daring escape and emerged from that manhole cover. There's no way. I needed time to think this over, so I just started walking. Seeing where my feet would carry me. Eventually, I thought I heard my name being called. I brushed it off as just some hallucination. After all, I probably was going insane. I didn't know if I was in my right mind or not. But my name kept getting called, and whoever was calling it, they were getting closer and closer. Until finally a car came into view. And there was a lady who had her head stuck out the driver's side window and was frantically calling my name. I was dumbfounded. It couldn't be. But it was. My caseworker. I jumped up and down and waved my hands, and she stopped a few feet in front of me. She put the car in park, hopped out, and ran to me. "Oh, I've been looking for you everywhere," she said, breathing a sigh of relief. "I didn't know if I would ever see you again." I got into the back seat, and as we drove off, she told me about how she had found the perfect foster family for me. She said, "This time, I really think it will be different. They're great with kids, having raised several of their own. I really think you'll be at home here." I was starting to feel relaxed and comfortable. But all of a sudden, I swore I could hear muffled laughter. It sounded like the laughter of a clown. For whatever reason, I glanced into the rearview mirror, and I noticed there was a Ronald McDonald clown sitting in the seat next to me. Goosebumps covered my body. Did I dare look to my left? Did I dare look to the seat next to me? Ever so slowly, I turned my head, but there was no one there but that laughter. I could hear it clear as day. And every time I looked into the rearview mirror, that clown was there. But whenever I turned my head, it wasn't. Something else I began to notice. My caseworker had started laughing too. I woke up in a cold sweat. The covers and pillows just about strangling me. I sat upright in a flash and took in the room around me. It was my room. I was in my foster family's home. I started breathing a sigh of relief. Had this all just been a horrible nightmare? Had I dreamed the whole thing from the moment my caseworker sat me down to talk about options, of which there had only been two, the military school or the Ronald McDonald house, all the way up until I was back in my caseworker's car, hearing that maniacal laughter. I pinched myself. I was awake. I threw the covers to the floor as I was sweating profusely. I started to laugh a little. I was so happy it was all just a dream. But then I looked down and I noticed I was wearing a dirty, ripped hospital gown. Just like the one in my dream. For some unknown reason, I glanced up at my bedroom mirror, which was directly in front of my bed. And I swore I could see the ghostly figure of Ronald McDonald leaning over my shoulder, laughing.